before I begin, I would like to ask any one of you in one sentence, what is madness according to you? Toastmaster Kushal, would you like to answer?
I was saving this for the TTM, but I saw 2 movies in one day. So that's one thing.
Alright. So, to put it in a nutshell, madness is something that doesn't make sense, something that is irrational. So, imagine this. You are standing in the middle of the desert of New Mexico on July 16th, 1945. Standing next to you is one of the most important people to ever exist, General Leslie Groves, the man in charge of Project Manhattan, world's first ever nuclear testing program. With the click of a button, you see a new sun rising in the sky. Something so powerful, so bright, and so devastating. This is nothing other than the nuclear bomb. Power to change the world forever. Now, what would be your reaction when you get to hear your general ask you, did we just poison the air? What is going to be your reaction to that? My reaction would be, is this guy mad or what? And how did he even get here? Well, this wasn't an exception. In fact, it was very common. The nuclear technology at that time was somewhat new, and most of the scientists even didn't know how to properly work it out. So the first ever nuclear test was nothing short of a gamble. Moving on a few months, Japan finally surrendered in World War II after getting nuked twice because they didn't know how to give up after getting nuked once. So now, finally, World War has ended and humanity will know peace and prosperity. Well, nope. Some insane guy decided it would be a good idea to leak nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union. And now Soviet Union was developing their own nuclear program. This was bad news for Uncle Sam. They were thinking, what should we do? And thus began the era of Cold War. To give you a general idea of this era, imagine your parents just had a major fight and now are being passive aggressive towards each other. That is Cold War in a nutshell. Now, USA thought, what can they do? And they came up with the idea of making bigger and more powerful weapons to show them the power of the mighty USA. But there was a slight problem with that. You see, there was no area large enough to test bigger bombs. So they looked around in the maps and they found this teeny tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean known as Bikini Atoll. Also roughly translates to Coconut Island. Now, the US Army got there and they requested the Bikinians to lend them their islands to help them fight the war that will end all the other wars. The Bikinians obliged because who wouldn't when you are faced with the Navy, world's strongest Navy? So they obliged and they agreed to leave their island. Then came the fireworks. For several years, USA started testing bigger and more powerful nuclear weapons. But unlike World War II, this time it was supposed to be seen by everyone, especially the communists and the Soviets. They wanted to show them the might of the USA. So they thought it would be a good idea to get half a ton of filming camera equipment and air it to the rest of the world. But it had a somewhat reverse effect. People back home started worrying that what is their government doing making such weapons while people are dying? The conservatives thought they were working against God by making such powerful weapons. The liberals, well, they've always been tree-hugging and peace-loving people, no point in explaining that. And thus, US government was facing the heat. On the other hand, the Bikinians who left their islands were now starving on the other islands without any resources. This was a bad space to be in for the US government. What can they do to get the heat off their head? They looked around and they found this one person, this guy named Louis Rier, who designed this new swimsuit which was very controversial because it contained less than 30 square inches of fabric. This was the perfect distraction. Soon, every news outlet which was questioning the government about their motives in the Bikini at all was now asking conservatives and liberals about their opinions on Bikini. Not the island, but the swimwear. And thus, people started disassociating that island with the word bikini and associated the swimwear with the word bikini. This wasn't the first time distraction was used by the government, media was used by the government to distract its own citizen, and it won't be the last. 90,000 Bikinians still couldn't go to their islands, and the testing went on for 12 more years. When they finally got to go to their island, they got a gift in paradise. Radiation poisoning, acute radiation poisoning. That place turned out to be 10 times more radioactive than Chernobyl, and is still more radioactive than Chernobyl today. That island is still inhabitable, and the Bikinians are still without their own homeland. When later asked about them, then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger said, and I quote, "There's only 90,000 of them, who gives a damn?" The moral of the story is that there is no moral to the story. Whatever your outtake is, consider it your moral. But one thing I would like to say, that whenever everyone is talking about one thing, whenever others are not making sense, when there's only one thing that they're talking about, keep your eyes and ears open, because that is when grander schemes are at play. That was all from my side. Thank you for listening to me.